So we're delighted to have Ms. Arunma Oteh at Afreximbank TV. And Arunma, I hear that you took Oxford by storm last month during your birthday party, wearing the badge who's supported by the Afreximbank. So congratulations again on your birthday.
Thank you.
But you're also the author of All Hands on Deck,
Yes.
a book I've been privileged to read, which is actually a fantastic read. And I like the fact that it's very accessible, but at the same time very detailed, so the intricacies of success. And I know that actually for you to succeed, former DG of the Securities Exchange Commission of Nigeria, and also a treasurer at the World Bank, of course. But I saw that to become or to succeed at the SEC was very challenging. Not because you needed the political support, but because your life was was being threatened. You had death threats, so you had to overcome all those headwinds, let's say, to succeed. So do we face a more challenging time to succeed on the continent?
Well, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to you for what you've said about All Hands on Deck, unleashing prosperity through world capital markets. It's a love story of me as to how capital markets can really transform society, and I do believe that the continent needs it more than ever before, because what you need, as has been said at the annual general meetings of the Afreximbank, is long-term, patient, reasonable price capital. Some of why the US has been able to succeed, why startups, start as mom and pop businesses in dorms like Facebook, Microsoft, is because of the capital markets. It's because it's easy to get capital. And so some of what I advocate is really what it takes to build world-class capital markets. And it's all hands on deck because everybody can contribute to building a world-class capital market. So everybody can contribute to transforming society. So first of all, I was fortunate as a young child, as an 8-year-old, when my parents introduced me to the stock market in Nigeria. They were not finance experts. They were both civil servants. And what they did was just invest in blue chip companies, Nestle, Unilever, and the dividends and some of the capital gains was what they used to pay for my education and the education of my siblings. So I tell that story just to help everybody understand that the capital markets are not something the rich people do, something the finance experts do. It's something all of us can do. You can save money, you can invest it. I talk about the value of capital markets to governments. I mean, when you look across the continent, I think that South Africa is a country where the infrastructure is relatively, at a good stage. In most other countries, not quite so. In Nigeria, not so. And you need lots of money, but you need it to be long-term to be able to build the kind of infrastructure that will be the backbone of supporting an economy. Businesses, existing businesses, new businesses also need capital. Basically to start new businesses or to expand. And that's why I say it's all hands on deck. But your question specifically around what do we need in terms of the kind of leadership that we need on the continent to transform the continent? I'm very particular, and I talk about it all the time. You need what I call 4C leaders. You need leaders that have character. You should not compromise issues around integrity. And I like what Warren Buffett said is that, basically, I think he's talked about 3 things, but that if you don't have character, the others wouldn't happen. You need to have compassion because that gives you empathy. That means that you think about others when you're doing things. As a leader, you should, of course, be able to be competent in what you do. But I also think that courage is important because a leader is in front. A leader is a pioneer. People are not really thinking about the things that you're thinking about. And so those are my 4 C's, and they're particularly important. And of course, everybody loves Nelson Mandela, but I love him very much. And he is my 4C leader. And I was lucky as a young woman in boarding school, I was introduced to him by some young women from South Africa who were in my boarding school in Nigeria. And just, to look at his life and to see what he was able to achieve But most importantly, because he's a compassionate person, he could forgive people for putting him in jail for 27 years. And as a leader, when you focus on what you're doing, when you focus on the other person, then you can make a difference. So it's also a story about leadership. I do talk about some of my own experience as the head of a capital market regulator in Nigeria, the Director General of Securities and Exchange Commission, because I had no clue when I joined that I would have to deal with the things that I dealt with. I had no clue when, after I think the first few months, the National Security Advisor literally invites me to his office and he says, "Oh, we like what you're doing, but I hope you know that your life is at risk." And I'm like, "Really? Why?" He says, "There are people who don't like what you're doing. We like what you're doing, and you need to stay alive so that you can do what you're doing." So he gave me 2 state security service people, 3 police officers who were amazing and followed me around the entire time. But I was like, well, if I die, then at least I would have died for a good cause. So I had no problem dying. And so for me, exercising courage is not an issue for me, because I think that if you're determined to do the things that you need to do, if you have a continent that is this wealthy, when I talk about the wealth of the continent, 70% of the cobalt that the world needs is mined in Africa. And platinum, I think, is 90% of the world's reserves in platinum is in this continent, Africa. So how is it that this continent has some of the poorest countries in the world? I mean, we should ask ourselves, and I consider myself privileged. I consider you and I privileged. I consider anybody who's listening to Afreximbank TV privileged. And so we need to say we must make a difference. And I hope that it's in my lifetime. I hope I can do my own bit. And wherever I am, I'm praying that what I'm doing is doing my own bit. And the book is a call to action for everybody to say, what can I do differently to make sure that Africa has the finances it needs to unleash its enormous potential? And I think that this is Africa's century. The reason I think it's Africa's century, the greatest asset that people have is its people. And Africans, 60% of us, some people say 70%, are below the age of 30. Europe would die to have that. Many countries around the world would die to have that. So we must make sure that we prepare this continent so that the young people can unleash their potential, so that Africa can truly be great for itself, but also for the world. Because I think that where Africa goes is where the world goes. So that's why I say it's a bit of a love story around the value of capital markets to society, the fact that all of us can be involved in leveraging finance for a good society. But it's also about leadership. And I think leaders are in privileged positions to make a difference. So I'm glad that you've read it and that you like it.
And it's full of nuggets, actually, of information, so the stats. So it's very well researched, but also very accessible. That's what I liked about it.
So my idea was that I didn't want anybody to say, "Oh my God, she was a treasurer of the World Bank, so I can't read the book. It's all about finance." I wanted the ordinary person to read about finance and enjoy reading about finance and fall in love with finance in the way that I fell in love with finance as an 8-year-old.
Yeah. And we'll talk about capital markets in a second. Okay. So, but you also said the 3 C's, but you could probably have conviction. You have conviction to actually change and make a difference. So we spoke about leadership, and so you knew Mr. Babacar Ndiaye,
yes,
who was you could say the founding father of Afreximbank.
Yes.
And you've also worked with Professor Oramah. Yeah. So tell us about these 2 individuals.
So let me start with Babacar Ndiaye. It's very emotional for me because I joined the African Development Bank in April 1992, and Babacar Ndiaye was the president at the time of the African Development Bank, and he would do a walkabout. In December. And in December, he did the walkabout around the office. And I shared an office with a more senior colleague. I was the only person in the office. And because he did a walkabout of the entire building, they would make him spend like 1 or 2 minutes. But what I found particularly fascinating, and that's one of the things I learned about leadership, is making sure that you're accessible and available to people so that you can know what's truly going on. So he came, said hello to me. He said, I've never met you. I said, I joined in April of 1992. And his team were like, oh, okay, Mr. President, you need to move on. And he said, no, he wants to spend time with me. He wanted to know the projects I was working on. He wanted to know the countries I was working on. I'd just come back from a mission in Sudan. He wanted to hear about Sudan. He wanted to hear about the projects, So it was phenomenal. So he's a leader who cares. His compassion is huge. So it's one of the things that I learned from him around the importance of compassion. Of course, I was in the ADB when the Afreximbank was founded and followed some of the work that was done. And one of the things that I admired about him was his vision around what will transform the continent. I'm sure today he's thinking 32 years on, 33 years on, I'm very proud of the fact that I took this step to set up what is a trade bank for the continent. I mean, look at what Afreximbank has achieved. He set up Shelter Afrique. He set up many other initiatives. He was somebody who, you put him in front of investors, and he had a compelling story on the continent. And I said that I met him in December of 1992, but I was in business school when he made the front cover of Institutional Investor. And one of the reasons that I ended up working at the African Development Bank was just the story about his life. He started at the African Development Bank. He's actually the only staff from the African Development Bank who's ever become the president. I think he was the second professional staff or so, but he deeply cared about people. He understood countries. He visited, he spent time with people. He spent time with staff. He spent time with his shareholders. And even after he completed his term, he was very committed to the continent. He was very involved to the continent. And he's a great example. And I'm very, very delighted that the Afreximbank has this annual memorial lecture where they bring the best and the brightest to come and continue to talk about what it will take to make Africa unleash its. He was an icon, and I truly miss him. And I thank God for what he did for Africa and what he did for the continent as well, what he did for the world as well.
We'll get to Professor Oramah in a second.
Yes, yeah.
But maybe we'll go back to capital markets.
Yes.
So today, Aliko Dangote said that he's looking at listing two companies, the fertilizer company, also potentially the refinery later on,
yeah.
One next year, the one maybe then a year after. So it must be music to your ears to hear that private groups are now listing on the stock exchange, because that's what we need. We need more of those private groups that people can invest in to create those dynamic, liquid capital markets.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was music to my ears that Alhaji Aliko Dangote said that. I mean, he's been an example of listing his companies on the Nigerian Group Exchange. It was Nigerian Stock Exchange previously. So I'm really delighted that he understands the value of stock markets. My view is that the value of stock markets are several. One is that it allows many more people to access wealth. And what he's doing is an opportunity for the ordinary person to participate in the growth story that he shared about the fertilizer company and about the refinery. And he's a veteran in building businesses that last and make a difference. So that's one. So inclusive wealth. The second is that I've always advocated that companies should list on the stock market because it strengthens the governance. Because if you list on the stock markets, there are other people who are looking at the governance to make sure that it's best practice. And because it's Africa, because people don't quite understand Africa, what I like is when African entities ensure that they're focusing on best practice globally. The third is, that it also enhances the brand because many more people have a stake. One of the, when I was encouraging telecom companies in Nigeria to list, and I'm glad that MTN is now listed on the market, I said, if Nigerians had shares in your company, if anyone is trying to do anything to your towers or base stations, people will literally block them because they have a stake. So it enhances the brand. There's so many other reasons why. And of course, it's many more people. I mean, we've got the AFC president, Samaila, said that there's $4 trillion of wealth on the continent. Some of it is institutional investor money, some of it is retail money. And part of when you list companies on the stock markets, then there are many more products that people can invest in. So absolutely a great one. And I hope that other businesses are encouraged to do the same.
And you oversaw and you could say orchestrated the dual listing of SEPLAT at the time.
Yes.
On the Nigerian Stock Exchange, we used to be called, and also on the London Stock Exchange.
Yes, yes.
So,
and for me, that was very significant because Dr. Jako, who the founding chairman, had come to me and said, I'd like to, we do want to list on both the Nigerian Exchange and the London Stock Exchange, but the listing authority, it seems to be delaying. And I said, you do want people to understand that this is a first-class company. So we will wait for the listing authority in the UK to finish their due diligence, because we do want people to understand that brand Nigeria is brand excellence, that there are people who understand the value of excellence, and a lot of them are Nigerians. And I'm very glad that they accepted and waited. I think they were actually quite surprised that I, as a regulator, was saying, we will wait for the other regulator. But regulators around the world also work very closely together. What I want to see is many more of such stories. A lot of the young people I mentor who have startups, and constantly saying to them, I'm waiting for my pocket money when you list on NASDAQ or any of their exchanges around the world, because we also need to focus on building internally, but we also need to go global. That's what a lot of the Asian entities have also done.
And so we're on Afreximbank TV. You've known Professor Oramah for many years now. So the final word is to Professor Oramah. So how have you seen his 2 terms in office and his 30 plus years at the bank in terms of transforming the continent?
Absolutely an exemplary leader. I wish that we had more leaders on the continent around the world like him. And in my comments, my remarks yesterday, I shared some of my thoughts, and I'll just repeat them. There are a number of things that distinguish him. He's also a 4C leader, so character, competence, compassion, and courage. But he's somebody who is uniquely distinct because he combines what is rare, vision and execution. So for me, that's significant because there are a lot of leaders who are visionary leaders, but they're not good with execution. But he combines both. And you'll see that in terms of how he's taken all of the absolutely game-changing initiatives from a vision, from an idea, a vision, and then to execution. But let me be more specific about that. I serve on the board of the Pan-African payment settlement systems. And I was fascinated to learn, joining the board, that this was actually something that the African Union had expressed a desire to have a payment system that allows Africans to trade amongst themselves. So Professor Oramah is a man who goes back to history and says, okay, this was agreed upon, I'll do something about it. So it was phenomenal for me that he took that initiative, he set up PAPS, and PAPS is doing a great job on the continent. But he's also extended it to what we now call the 6th region of Africa. So the Caribbean countries who have become members, most of them, I think 10 of them have become members of the Afreximbank, have also taken on board PAPS. And I think the numbers are just, with the marketplace function of PAPS, which basically allows African currencies to trade amongst her. We save $5 billion in transaction costs annually. $5 billion. You know how much can be done with $5 billion. The budgets of many African countries is not even $5 billion. So a man who thinks through issues, who then delivers with stellar execution is what distinguishes him. Another example that I can give that people have talked about is COVID. During COVID, Africans weren't able to access vaccines. He got the African countries together, got a few leaders to support him in building that initiative, and built a platform that allowed them to get vaccines quickly. The other one is recognizing that, yes, this is a trade bank, But without eliminating obstacles to trade, you will not be able to scale trade. And that's been what has been very much, in my view, my assessment of what has driven the things he has done. So it's out of the box thinking, it's vision, it's stellar execution.
And it's all hands on deck.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
and
and
he's also very good in bringing people together. Yes.
Read the book, highly recommended. Arunma Oteh, it's been great to have you on Afreximbank TV. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much also, Omar, for all that you do. I know that in this role, you're helping Afreximbank, but the depth of the work that goes into Africa business, new African banker, I'm really, really proud of IC Publications. Well done on your leadership as well.